Well, good morning. Morning. I have a few announcements for you before we begin our service. Today, after coffee hour, we will be having a Soul Matters group to continue the discussion about the topic of core values that Reverend Janet introduced in her sermon last week. Everyone is welcome to join in the conversation. It's always a drop-in activity. Reverend Janet sent out questions about values in Friday's weekly email to stimulate the conversation, but if you didn't see those, it doesn't matter. Copies will be available. We'll meet at 11:45 in the historical room, which is that door on the other side of the Janet. Tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day, and the Meeting House Foundation will be holding its annual program here in the sanctuary. It begins at 2 o'clock and features Keith Knight, an activist, comedian, and cartoonist. He'll be presenting a slideshow of his comic strips and talking about race with a humorous edge. It will be entertaining and enlightening. He's really great. I strongly recommend it. The church's annual meeting is coming up on Sunday, January 22nd, following the worship service. We're planning to be here in person for the first time since January of 2020, so please try to make it, be part of the community. It'll be a nice event. Well, a nice meeting where we solve a lot of the issues of the church and discuss the issues, so it's an important meeting to attend. It's also fun. Now that the holidays are over, we're hoping people will resume the practice of donating flowers for the altar for our services. Please contact Christine in the church office if you'd like to donate flowers in honor or memory of someone or just because. Also, please mark your calendars for the next meeting of the church book group. That will take place on February 1st at 10:30, again, the historical room. The book selection this time is by Geraldine Brooks called Horse. Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church. It's lovely to see you all here today, and a warm welcome to all of you who are watching us from home or somewhere else. We're very happy to have you with us here today as well. Here is where we gather weekly to consider the great mysteries of life, namely this morning, what has happened to the sun. That's something I'm pondering. One of you a minute ago described the weather today as dank, which I think was a perfect word. So at any rate, glad to have you here brightening this space and brightening our environment. Everyone is welcome here. We're glad to have you. I see a number of visitors this morning and very happy to have you with us. We are a welcoming congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, which means that we affirm the full inclusion of people of all sexual orientations and gender expressions. And where we have a lot of people now watching from outside of the building, I want to encourage people, if you want to start getting more connected with the community life here, to, for those of you visiting this morning, you can fill out a yellow pew card and put it in the collection plate, and we'll be in touch. If you're watching from home, please feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and see if you want to get together for a walk or coffee, and I'm always happy to do that. So a couple of quick things. One is, if you heard Pat's announcement about the Soul Matters discussion after church this morning at 11:45, we'll be revisiting the conversation about core values, and I hope many of you can join us for that. I wanted to mention quickly that I will not be here with you next Sunday. Reverend Art McDonald, who many of you know, and I are having a pulpit swap next Sunday. So Reverend Art is going to be here, and I'm going to preach at the church in Essex. And then I will race back here for annual meeting. So, hopefully there won't be any red lights. At any rate, I just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. And then finally, I wanted to really put a plug in for the book club book, which is very enjoyable and a lot of fun. And also, as Jerry Ackerman pointed out this week, has a direct connection to this congregation, not just Gloucester, but this congregation. So with that teaser, I'm trying to encourage more people to read it. And with that, let us deepen our hearts and our spirits for worship. Come, whoever you are. Come with your hurts, your imperfections, your places that feel raw and exposed. Come, whoever you are. Come with your strengths that the world shudders to hold. Come with your wild imaginings of a better world. Come with your hopes that it seems no one wants to hear. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, we will make a place for you. We will build a home together. Ours is no caravan of despair. We walk together. Come, yet again, come. Come and let us worship together. Our opening hymn this morning is number 168 in the gray hymnal, One More Step. You're invited to rise in body or in spirit. In our faith tradition, we begin our services with the kindling of our chalice. The flame of our chalice this morning is a symbol of the warmth and brightness of our connections, and it lights our way forward into our shared future as a community. And if you have a candle or a chalice waiting with you at home, please light it with us now. We take a moment now to affirm the covenant that we share. Newcomers and guests, the words are printed in your order of service. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. And as we have been doing for almost a year now, we are lighting a candle for peace. And I offer the words of the Reverend Marta Valentine. Today, more than ever, we dream of peace. Peace in our hearts, which have been clouded over with promises of a free world that will never come to pass if bought with the blood of war. Today, we dream of peace.
Our first reading this morning is from The Low Road by Marge Piercy. What can they do to you?
Whatever they want.
They can set you up, they can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electricity.
They can blur you with drugs till you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing.
How can you stop them? Alone, you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you.
But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army.
Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex.
Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party.
A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country.
It goes on one at a time.
It starts when you care to act.
It starts when you do it again and they said no.
It starts when you say we and know who you mean.
And each day you mean one more. Here ends our reading. I invite us now into a time of prayer to be followed by silent meditation. And so let's pause for a moment and catch our breath and let the peace of this sacred place envelop us. Spirit of life, who we know as love, enter into our hearts this morning as we honor all those who work for justice. We especially remember the life of Dr. Martin Luther King, who worked tirelessly to create a peaceful and just world, but to whom the world responded with violence. Today, we also remember all those who joined in the movement to demand basic civil rights, many of them forgotten, many unknown. We honor all those who said yes when called to step into the struggle. We honor all those today who continue to say yes. We remember that the creation of a more just world is ever unfolding. The people everywhere face oppression, hunger, and poverty. The work never ends. Help us to be part of the movement toward justice, and help us to find the courage to say yes to the call when it comes for us. Spirit of love, help us also today to hold the pain and sorrow that life brings to us all. Remind us that life together helps us to hold all of our adversity and to share our joy. We send our loving thoughts to all those we know who are experiencing loss and sorrow or illness this morning. May they and we find solace and peace. Blessed be. Amen.
I invite you now to join together in a responsive reading. It's number 584 in the gray hymnal, entitled A Network of Mutuality. I'd like you to read the italic portions, please. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted.
Hatred and bitterness and the network of disease and fear. Only love can do that.
We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation.
The foundation of such a method is love.
Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and perpetuate war.
One day, we must come to see that peace is not merely a physical goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal.
We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means.
We shall hear out of the mountains of despair, stone of hope.
Now is the time in our service when we offer our commitment and generosity. We are here today because of the love and the faith of the generations of members and friends who believed in this community and who have gone before us. And we carry on the work that they began, and we will shepherd this story forward for all those who follow us. For the life and the health of this congregation and its ministries, this morning's offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity. keeping you busy today. We're keeping you very busy today.
This reading is excerpted from Progress Report by Sonia Sanchez that appeared in the 1619 project published this year. In this country, where history and herstory stretches in aristocratic silence, our black, white, brown activists have come at the beginning of the 21st century carrying the quiet urgency of a star. And the country is not the same. I say, who are these people singing down the lids of cities with color? I say, who are these people always punctual with their eyes, their hearts, their hands? I say, who are these singers who resurrect summer language on our winter landscape? They remind each other of what Fanon said. What is needed is to hold oneself like a sliver to the heart of the world, to interrupt, if necessary, the rhythm of the world, to upset, if necessary, the chain of command, but to stand up for the world. I do battle for creation of a human world that is a world of reciprocal recognition. What does honor taste like? Does honor have a long memory? What is the color of honor? I turn the corner of these honor-driven activists, find memory beneath their doors, taste the blessings of their midwifery, their miracle songs giving birth to unghosted wounds, their words coming to us glittering like silver stars, and I catch them in mid-flight, swallow them whole.
Those honor-driven activists. We find memory beneath their doors and taste the blessings of their midwifery. Today we pause and look back and pay our respects to all those honor-driven activists, the many who laid the groundwork long before the public events of the civil rights movement. And while we always honor Dr. Martin Luther King, and always will, for his vision and his inspiration and courage, we know that Dr. King could never have accomplished all that he did without a tremendous amount of help. And so today, we're going to tell the stories of some of the people who remained in Dr. King's shadow. And you probably have heard of most of them, but it can be surprising to discover just how important they were, and also to look honestly at the forces present in society that kept the spotlight from shining on them. And so as we name these people whose names can easily be forgotten, we must also name the need in every era, in every country, for the people to show up. All those who make small contributions. Because it starts when you say we and know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. She was raised in rural North Carolina and grew up hearing the stories her grandmother told about life as an enslaved person. One story that stood out for the young girl was that of how her grandmother was beaten and whipped for refusing to marry the man that her enslaver had chosen for her. She was Ella Baker, and from that beginning, she went on to graduate as the valedictorian from Shaw College in Raleigh. Ella's early career took her to work for the young NAACP, beginning in the late 1930s, and into voter registration efforts throughout the South. The seeds of the civil rights movement were being planted and watered by all those networks and relationships that people like Ms. Baker created, unseen, fully 20 years before the Montgomery bus boycott.
You didn't see me on television. You didn't see news stories about me. The kind of role that I tried to play was to pick up pieces or put together pieces out of which I hoped organization might come. My theory is strong people don't need strong leaders.
Grassroots organizing, with 20 years of effort and more. In 1956, the black churches began to plan a religious-based movement for racial justice to be led by clergy. The name they chose was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Their goal was to register black voters throughout the South. But the effort languished until Dr. King was convinced by others to hire Ella Baker to lead the organization and the voting rights effort. Now, apparently, Dr. King was very reluctant to do this. He was concerned that she wouldn't be effective because she was neither a minister nor a man. But as Taylor Branch recounts in his history of the civil rights movement, Parting the Waters, Ella Baker arrived in Atlanta and began without even a telephone or a typewriter. And a month later, she had organized 21 events to kick off the Southern Christian Leadership Conference's voter drive. Despite this clear organizational prowess, Ella Baker was never hired permanently. She was considered only to be an acting director. Eventually, a male minister was hired as executive director, but when he proved ineffective, Ella returned, once again, as an interim director, until she was once again replaced by a man in 1960. Ella then went on to play a very important role in the founding of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, which grew to play a very important part in actions such as the marches from Selma to Montgomery. Often we hear the late John Lewis's name mentioned in recounting the work of SNCC. But whoever mentions Ella Baker? Bayard Rustin was born in Pennsylvania in 1912 and was raised by his grandparents. His sense of himself was completely upended when he discovered, at the age of 11, that one of his older sisters was, in fact, his mother. In high school, Bayard Rustin played football, and once, while traveling to a game, the team stopped for a meal, and Mr. Rustin was refused service.
I sat there quite a long time, he recalled years later, and was eventually thrown out bodily. From that point on, segregation.
Bayard Rustin played a role throughout the 1930s and 1940s with numerous organizations working for peace and justice. He became a Quaker and was primarily motivated by pacifism. He led a colorful life, somewhat itinerant, as he moved among organizations and movements. And when he met Martin Luther King during the Montgomery bus boycott, he brought with him a great deal of experience in leading movements, as well as a very broad worldview based on his travels over the years. He was strongly influenced by Mohandas Gandhi.
The principal factors which influenced my life are 1, nonviolent tactics, 2, constitutional means, 3, democratic procedures, 4, respect for human personality, and 5, a belief that all people are one.
Bayard Rustin organized the first Freedom Ride, the very first, in 1947, and he also organized the 1963 March on Washington. And yet, he was kept carefully in the background because he was a gay man. This was open knowledge in some circles, and in fact, J. Edgar Hoover had the FBI surveilling Rustin and was trying to catch him in possibly compromising situations with Martin Luther King. And so Rustin was marginalized, pushed out of the center, despite his brilliance and his skills and his education and knowledge. He lived a shadowed life, both influential and limited, both impactful and hidden.
Ralph, they have bombed our home. But I'm all right, and so is the baby.
In the early morning hours of January 10th, 1957, bombs began to explode in Montgomery, Alabama. By morning, 4 black churches and 2 homes had been bombed. One of those homes was that of Reverend Ralph Abernathy and his wife, Juanita. Ralph Abernathy was staying at the King home in Atlanta and was awakened at 2:30 a.m. by a phone call from his badly shaken and pregnant wife. The late Representative John Lewis described Juanita Abernathy as his sister on the front lines. We have all heard often about the Montgomery bus boycott, but who organized it? According to her obituary, Mrs. Abernathy's son reminisced that she was instrumental in typing up flyers to hand out to black residents to urge them to boycott the buses. She got out her trusty Royal typewriter from college and carbon paper, her son said. She said that if she typed with a heavy hand, she could make 7 copies at once. Starting from there, Mrs. Abernathy also took on organizing complicated carpools to help people get to and from work without using the bus system. Apparently, funeral homes donated the use of their vehicles to ferry people around the city. Raised in a farming family in Alabama, Juanita attended college and taught high school business courses. And once the family moved to Atlanta, she was instrumental, along with the Kings, in working to desegregate the public schools there. Following the assassination of Martin Luther King, Juanita Abernathy stepped back from the civil rights movement. Instead, she rose high in the Mary Kay Cosmetic Company, including being awarded pink Cadillacs. But she always maintained her activism. In 1972, she led a peace march for women in Northern Ireland and was shot at with rubber bullets. She lived long enough to campaign for Barack Obama and to attend his first inauguration. And yet, we hear so little of her contributions. The hard work of organizing the bus boycott, pounding on a typewriter at night at the kitchen table in Montgomery, the sense of mission that enabled her to continue to contribute to the work despite death threats and bombs. I am all right, and so is the baby. And there was another baby on the way.
It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again and they say no. It starts when you say we and know who you mean. And each day you mean one more.
When she was born, she was delivered at home by her great-grandmother, who had been born into slavery. Though her parents were landowners, they were not wealthy, and the family, including the children, picked cotton to earn extra money. Despite that humble beginning, Coretta Scott King rose to international prominence. She studied singing at the New England Conservatory and was introduced to Martin while he was pursuing his doctorate at Boston University. Their relationship and their ties to Boston were honored just the other day by the unveiling of a new statue named Embrace, dedicated to them. But in the early days of the civil rights movement, Coretta Scott King was expected to simply be a minister's wife, a mother, and a housewife. Dr. King was very traditional, and the accounts of their courtship read more like a job interview. She had to prove that she could cook to his liking, and she was pressed to say whether or not she could be polite to the older and less educated members of a congregation. Somehow she not only passed all these tests, but she didn't flee the scene. And the Kings went on to have 4 children, even as the civil rights movement burst forth around them.
Martin was a very strong person, and in many ways had very traditional ideas about women, Mrs. King told the New York Times Magazine in 1972. She added, "He'd say, 'I have no choice. I have to do this, but you haven't been called.' And I said, 'Can't you understand? You know I have an urge to serve just like you do.'"
And serve she did, through death threats, attempts on her husband's life, including a stabbing, and a bombing of their home when their first child was 10 weeks old. It was after Dr. King's assassination in 1968 that Coretta Scott King emerged as a leader. She was called, and she found her voice. And she worked tirelessly for the rest of her life for justice, not just in the United States, but internationally as well. Just 2 months after King's death, she appeared at the Poor People's Campaign rally in Washington and delivered a speech. She was instrumental in creating the national holiday that we celebrate tomorrow. And she created the King Center for Nonviolent Change to continue his work and legacy.
"I didn't learn my commitment from Martin," she told an interviewer. "We just converged at a certain time."
Over time, Coretta Scott King broadened her husband's vision and took up many causes, including justice for women and for LGBTQ people. She actively opposed apartheid and traveled to South Africa.
"I still hear people say that I should not be talking about the rights of lesbian and gay people, and I should stick to the issue of racial justice. But I hasten to remind them that Martin Luther King Jr. said, 'Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.' I appeal to everyone who believes in Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream to make room at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood for lesbian and gay people."
Out from the shadows she stepped, first tentatively, and then more frequently and more boldly, until her life was devoted not just to carrying on her husband's work, but expanding it beyond his vision. Today, from the shadows have emerged a small number of heroes. talented and committed people who served the civil rights movement in ways large and small, but were too often hidden from view. They were kept from the center of the movement by the rampant sexism and the homophobia of the time. But like the movement they served, they could not be held back, held in the shadows, but found their way into the center, valued and valuable, and honored in the end. What does honor taste like? Does honor have a long memory? What is the color of honor? I turn the corner of these honor-driven activists, find memory beneath their doors, taste the blessings of their midwifery, their miracle songs giving birth to unghosted wounds, their words coming to us glittering like silver stars, and I catch them in mid-flight, swallow them whole. Today we honor these heroes. We honor them, and we also name the need for all of them and for all of us throughout history, throughout all the movements for peace and justice. There is need for us all. There always will be. Where are we in the movement for justice? It starts when we say, I. Blessed be. Amen. I invite us now to join in our responsive prayer, which is printed, our unison prayer, which is printed in your order of service. The words of the revered Howard Thurman. Open unto me light for my darkness. Open unto me courage for my fear. Open unto me hope for my despair. Open unto me peace for my turmoil. Open unto me joy for my sorrow. Open unto me strength for my weakness. Open unto me wisdom for my confusion. Open unto me forgiveness for my sins. Open unto me tenderness for my toughness. Open unto me love for my hates. Open unto me thyself for myself. Lord, Lord, open unto me. Our closing hymn is number 169 in your gray hymnal. We shall overcome.
We
hope of transforming the world and changing ourselves, we must be bold enough to step into our discomfort, brave enough to be clumsy there, loving enough to forgive ourselves and others. May we, as a people of faith, be granted the strength to be so bold, so brave, and so loving. Amen. And now, as we extinguish our chalice, people watching from home can extinguish your candles, and we will recite together the unison words printed in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we gather in our hearts until we are together again. Go in peace and return in love. Amen.